Hi, this is Ant Lyons from Your Property Network magazine, and I'm talking to my colleague and one of the key members of the team here, Michelle Cairns. So Michelle deals with, I guess, loads of our digital content, hosting the webinars, interviewing specialists for our podcast, and she's also a professional property investor herself. And today we're talking about the 5 biggest myths when it comes to investing in property. So, Michelle, you compiled a list of some of the things that people believe maybe before they come into property, or just as they're getting into property, or maybe even after they've been in property for a while.
Yeah, absolutely. So I think we've all got ideas around what is possible, and when people do start getting into property, even even before they are even aware that what can be done in property, people come with these ideas, sometimes called limiting beliefs, these beliefs about what is possible. And for example, the biggest one that I see people come through, especially friends and family who aren't in property, is that you need money to make money. So people think that they need a big deposit, a big chunk of cash. They need to have inherited some money or saved up a huge amount, and that's how they get into property. And even people who save that money, they get into property, they buy their first one, they then spend the next 5 years saving up for the next deposit. So I think it really does limit people on how quickly they can move in building their portfolio. So so today's just about pulling together some of the key myths. So that is the first one. What do you think about that first one? And you need money to make money.
Yes, that strategy that you outlined of, saving up a load of money, which takes a lot of work and time, and then investing it in a property and then doing the same again, that definitely works. And prior to me being in property, that's kind of what I thought people did. And I remember the first time I met someone who had 20 or 30 houses, and I just thought, how on earth do you get enough money to buy 20 or 30 houses? And what does this guy do outside of this? And I knew nothing about buying a property, whatever, below market value, or certainly keenly, and adding value to it, and then being able to refinance to get back your working capital. I definitely knew nothing about joint ventures and partnering with other people to help finance deals, or sourcing properties for others to make a profit to then maybe invest in property. I knew none of those things. And I knew what I knew, I guess, and that wasn't very much. So now we've been doing this I've been running the magazine for 15 years, and you and I have been working together for, I don't know, forever? Is it forever? So it's a while. And
a good 3 or 4 years, yeah.
Yes, and the rest, I think. But over that time, we've met maybe thousands of property investors, and I would say the number of people that came into this with a boatload of money and just parked it in property is maybe zero. It's very, very tiny percentage. Nobody does it that way if they want to kind of, I guess, aggressively grow a property business. So I think the caveat to that is that when there's a suggestion of, well, you don't need any money to do this, there is a suggestion that, that might make it easy then. And the two things are definitely not the same. It's going to take work. Particularly if you're starting out without money, it's going to take a little more work. Would you think that's fair to say?
Yeah, it's definitely not an overnight kind of, just buy 10 properties overnight kind of thing. But we've both seen people who have replaced their income in 6 months. There are people out there who've done it, and they've done it without any of their own money. So it can happen. It can be done. It requires certainly a lot of educating yourself on certain systems, how to do that, how to work with other people, making sure that you're doing things in the correct way, legally in some cases where you're looking at working with tenants, etc. So it can be done. Everyone's got their own pace, I think, and I think it's really important not to compare yourself to other people who do move very quickly. Everyone's in a different position. We've all got different amounts of cash, resources, time, networks, motivation, all of these things. So I think that, you know, the point is that you don't actually need to have a big pot of money to get started, and certainly even replace your income. And you know, I know, because I never had that pot of money, I had to use creative strategies, which, you know, I learned along the way. Certainly the first meeting that I ever went to, so the first networking meeting, was around 2015, 16. And before that, as you say, I knew nothing. I knew that you could buy and put tenants in, but it was a world I didn't know. I'd never thought about. So once I started learning about these things, it was all these light bulb moments going off. I was like, wow, who knew? Why have I got to this point in my life and nobody's told me that this we can work like this? So yeah, you don't always have to buy property to make money from property either, which is interesting. You can control a property. So just like you can lease a car, you can lease a property. And I know for some people that's like, well, how does that even work? And there are plenty of these creative strategies.
We definitely don't have time to go into all of
I know, we can't go
today.
into all of that.
Maybe we'll do separate individual videos about each of those things. But yeah, definitely, you know, you're going to need to hustle and work and get creative to do this. And it probably comes down to more of a desire to do it than the amount of money that you've got. So
yeah, great. Okay, let's move on to our second myth, which is you need to know everything before you get started. And this is one that I think some people get stuck in the learning mode. And as we just said, you absolutely need to know what you're doing on certain elements of starting the business and growing the business, but you actually don't need everything. And you are never going to know everything. And you have your own skill sets, you have your own strengths. And you're going to realize very quickly that you need to work as part of a team, whether that is bringing on a planning consultant or a solicitor or an interior designer or you know, a gardener or whatever it is, cleaning. If you're doing Airbnb, you certainly don't want to be the one with the Hoover cleaning up in between the guests, right? So you don't need to know everything to get started, but you do need enough to make sure that you are setting yourself up to succeed. Really, nobody wants to start a business, and this is a business that we're talking about. So you don't want to start a business just you know, trying to figure it all out for yourself, especially if you want to fast track what you're doing.
It's an interesting one, isn't it? Because you do have to know enough.
Yes.
And you'll never know everything. So at some point, you, and it can only be you, has to say, I feel enough. I feel I know enough to mitigate the risks in this now. I understand the deal. I understand the risks involved. I've spoken to a lot of people. I know roughly what I think my refurb's going to be. There shouldn't be any horrible surprises. I've got a very good idea of what the end value of my property is going to be, or whatever, you know, the metrics are for your particular deal, and then action it. Because I think you're absolutely right. Some people get stuck in this learning procrastination phase, and sometimes they go round in a loop. So they say, I want to buy a property that I'm going to do up, and then I'm going to refinance and I'm going to tenant it, or I'm going to sell it. And then they start learning about serviced accommodation, or they start learning about HMOs or small scale developments or commercial to residential conversions. And then before you know it, 3 years is gone and they've just learned. And, you know, they could have done that one strategy 10 times in that time frame. So, and it's good to learn more, obviously, but you're never going to know it all.
Yeah, absolutely. And like a really common one is obviously, what's the market going to do? I was at a networking meeting last week and the guy comes up to me and says, you know, what do you think the market's going to do, Michelle? I don't know. Get the crystal ball out. Who knows? Like there are certain trends.
Also, what market? You know, your market, your local market, to you, the street that you own a property in, or the ones that I own properties in, or the global property market. What are we talking about? And it's largely irrelevant. You need to know what's happening where you are, the tenant demand, or if you're doing service accommodation, the level of demand in that area. So generalizations about the property market are probably reserved for the sort of amateurs, I would say.
Yeah, and also I think people do get stuck in that because they don't know what's going to happen. Like this guy had a pot of money ready to go, and he's just thinking, "Oh, I need to wait until it drops." Well, nobody's going to know. So I was trying to explain to him that if it makes sense on the day that you buy it, then whether it goes up or down or not really shouldn't be a problem. If it drops down too much and the mortgage, if that's a real fear for you, then you need to mitigate that, or you need to decide whether you're comfortable with taking that risk. But you can't just just not do anything for 12 months because you're not sure, because there's an opportunity cost with that. Who knows? It might go up, it might go down.
All those deals have come and gone in that time. So
exactly.
Yeah, no, I couldn't agree more. It's a difficult one because you want to know enough to not make some horribly expensive mistakes, but at some point you need to say, I feel comfortable with my level of knowledge. So
yeah, and being around a community, whether that is through networking meetings or connecting with people from the magazine community as well, YPN, you will start to gauge, you'll assimilate that feeling of knowledge as well, of where people are at, who you can connect with, what other people are doing, and then that you've got a place that you can go to ask your questions as well, which is really important.
Okay.
Okay, so the next one is a bit of an interesting one. So you can make millions overnight, right? And I think people come in with two camps. They either come in with the camp we started at before, but it's like, I need some money to make money. I haven't got it. So what? Why should I even start? This idea of like, it's too difficult. I need to know everything. And then on the flip side of that is some people come in through, they might have seen, adverts for people who are selling property courses or whatever it is. And they're saying, this is really easy. You can replace your income in like 3 weeks. You can do this. You can be a millionaire. And they make it seem like super easy. And that's not always the case either.
No, I mean, look, let's be completely frank about this, that some people do make a huge amount of money in a very short space of time. Those people absolutely exist. Most people probably take a little bit longer. And whilst what we do in property, it's not rocket science, it's not incredibly complicated. Most people can learn it. That is definitely not the same thing as being easy. So we said this in the first one, didn't we? That, there's going to be work involved, and probably the volume of work and the effort that you put in will be reflected in how quickly you achieve your desired results. And for some people, they'll go out and do a deal tomorrow to buy or develop a block of flats, and that will happen in a relatively short space of time, and they'll put a boatload of money into the bank. But probably for most of us, it's a slightly longer term plan. And you said earlier on, there's definitely people who are out there replacing an income within 6 months to a year. That's definitely doable. My experience, I think I've heard this a few times before as well, is that people grossly overestimate what they're going to do in the first year, and then underestimate where they'll be in 10 years' time. Yeah, and the get rich quick thing is definitely not the same thing as get rich easily. So we need to differentiate between those two things, because there are strategies out there that would see you replace your income within a month or 2 months, potentially. Doesn't necessarily mean they'll be dead easy.
Yeah, absolutely. So lots that you can do. Again, it just comes back to how much time, commitment, resources you've got, and how much kind of like, what's the fire in your belly like?
Yeah, and
the reason why.
An appetite for risk as well, because big
Yes,
reward is normally offset by higher levels of risk. So you kind of need to. We were saying, you don't need to know everything, but you probably need to know that about yourself, don't you? That you need to be comfortable with whichever sphere of property that you're going to operate in.
Okay, next one is trusting the expert. And I think we are, as a society, we grow up to be very kind of compliant and follow what, you know, the authorities say, and trust what they say without question. And when people come into property, they assume that because they are paying a certain profession, you know, some money, that they will take care of everything and they know exactly what they're doing, and not to question it, whether that be, you know, a solicitor or an architect. And it's just, what I found is it's not always the case, that there's still an element of personal responsibility, of checking things to make sure, like, you know, human error hasn't occurred, or that, you know, there's that even I'll give you an example. Okay, so there was a project that I did, and it was a 3-bed flat in a basement, and the idea was to convert the basement to a 3-bed flat. And the architect drew some beautiful plans, made it all look great, and that was it. So I actually, when I looked at the plans, I spotted an opportunity, and I actually was able to split that into a 2-bed flat and create a 1-bed flat out of it. But don't need to go into the details. But the point is, the architect was there to follow instructions. Like, they weren't there to get the best possible outcome for me. They weren't there to think outside the box necessarily. So sometimes, you know, you've got to kind of trust your gut and ask questions. Again, with solicitors, like, the amount of paperwork that has come back, and there's, you know, errors all over it, it's the wrong address, it's the wrong dates, and you think, wow, I'm paying this person thousands of pounds. Like, the idea is that they should just be getting it right from the start, so I don't need to check it. What's your experience?
Yeah, so it's a really interesting one, because I think this trusting the expert, or always trusting the expert, can be, there's lots of different examples. So here's a prime one. You know, if you're just starting out as, we've got an old family solicitor that we've used before, you know, whatever, insert name here. So I'll work with them. And then you're doing something which is kind of, you know, maybe a bit more creative in there. Yeah. So you say, okay, there's a piece of land that I want to get an option on to buy, because I think if I get the option on it, I can mitigate the risk. I can get planning on it, and then I can either buy it, or I can sell it on to a developer, or I can do something with it. And then going to, like, your a solicitor which just deals with, you know, like a sort of conveyancing factory type thing. That's all they do, is buy and sell bog standard houses every day. They are not your expert. They cannot put this together for you. And similarly, people who say, well, you know, I've always had a good relationship with my bank, so I'll go to them about my bridging finance, or my buy-to-let mortgage, or my development finance. They are almost certainly not the experts for you. You know, you need to talk to a specialist in, if it's bridging, a specialist bridging lender, or a broker that specializes in that. So, and the last one is probably in the property education sphere. There's loads of people to learn off, and many of them are absolutely brilliant. I always think it's a little bit worrying when someone paints themselves as a property expert in all things property. So, you know, many of the big sort of property education companies work really well because they've got trainers on board who are specialists in particular areas. If you've got one person stood at the front of the room saying, I'm the property expert, it's like, are you really an expert in all different strategies and tools? And, you know, of course they're not. And we'd be daft to sort of, you know, believe that they are really. So at the same time, another caveat, I'm afraid, is that whilst you can't completely trust every expert, to a degree, you have to put some of your trust in experts, because as we said earlier on, you can't learn everything yourself. You're not going to go back to university for 7 years to study architecture to do this yourself. So you need to get this balance right of understanding the questions that you need to ask, or the information that's important and having someone that you are instructing that you trust to be able to implement those rather than blindly trust. And blind trust is very dangerous in the world that we operate in. We're talking about very large sums of money. If it goes wrong, sometimes it could wipe you out. So I think, go with your gut, but do your due diligence always. So
yeah, I think you hit the nail on the head there, that it's the blind trust that's the problem. You certainly do need to have an element of trust when you're working with other people, whatever capacity that is, whether it's money or skill set or whatever. So yeah, it's interesting, isn't it? And you mentioned before about training companies. As we said, there's plenty out there. A lot of the content is very similar, but they're not reinventing the wheel. They're all kind of sharing similar content that you could just find off Google, really, but it's the way they're packaging it. And if you are working with somebody that you've decided, actually, I get a good feel from this person, like I understand what they're doing and I gel with them, I like their style of teaching, then really it's about trusting the process. Because once you've committed, once you're working with somebody or a company, then you really need to trust the process, that it works, and look for testimonials, look for other people who've been through it and have got the results that you want. And that for me is stronger than actually trusting the person. That makes sense. Blindly.
Yeah. Do you when you were kind of in going through different property education programs, did you find people that would learn and then go, I've learned exactly how to do this, but I'm going to do it my own way a little bit, and then not get results? So it's a bit like going to a personal trainer and getting a program and getting a nutrition program, and they're going, yeah, but I'm just going to eat what I want anyway. And
a really simple example is, going to networking meetings, telling everybody about what you do and what you want, right? Because if you don't ask for what you want, like, you won't get. So one of the key things is go along to networking meetings and say, if you are looking to work with other people, raise money or find deals or whatever it is, like, tell people. And you see people who think, well, actually, I don't want to get out of my comfort zone and do that, so I'm not going to follow the process. But then they're disappointed at the end because they haven't achieved the results that they want. So the process works, and we can see it's worked because people have gone through it and they've got the results. So the more that you do the right things in the right order and you follow that process, the better results you're going to get. So there we go.
There we go. So, okay. So final myth
is similar. We touched on this a little bit, but that you can do it all on your own. And this is another sort of group of people who think, okay, you know what, it's all on Google. Why do I need to kind of get education, or why do I need to learn about this stuff? I can just figure it out myself. And this comes from interviewing God knows how many people through the years, and particularly different specific strategies were, for example, Airbnb, right? So we have a training company and I interview people every month on how they started their Airbnb business, how they set it up, how they scaled it up. And a pattern that I noticed throughout is that they started and a lot of them said, oh, at the beginning it was terrible, things didn't work, this didn't work, this went wrong, like I persevered and I got through it in the end, and now I'm here to share all the things that I learned. So the point is, they try to do it on their own first. And we're talking about a property business here. We're talking about making serious amount of money, and trying to figure it out on your own, it's just a slow way. Apart from anything, it's stressful, it can be painful, you can lose money. So you do need to get yourself to a certain place where you've, as we say, you've got enough knowledge.
I would always reach out to someone. And we're fortunate, we're quite well connected in the sort of property industry. But if I was looking at anything new, I would, go through the magazine or go through my kind of, contacts list and say, right, well, who's done this? Who's done what I'm looking to do? How can I pick their brains? How can I find out the mistakes that they made along the way? And the other example of people doing it all on their own, which it sort of beggars belief a little bit, is that there's a belief that, I need to do everything on this property myself. So I will buy it. I will, maybe I'll try and source a mortgage myself. Maybe I'll even try and manage some of the conveyancing, and I'll go in there and I'll fix the property physically myself. Or I'll do the plumbing and the electrics myself. Some people may have the skills to do it. Others are learning on the job, trying to do that. I can't believe that's ever going to be an efficient way of working. I know loads of people who've done that, and they do one property and then they give up because it was hell on earth. Working during the day, driving to a property and doing another 6 hours every evening, that is not what we get into property for. Well, it's certainly not what I go into property for. But
no, thankfully I don't have any of the skill sets of plumbing and everything, so I could never do that. But certainly I have, been out there doing the viewings on my own, and maybe at the beginning there is an element where you do need to go through the process, and money's tight and you need to do these kind of things.
Yeah.
But as soon as you can, as soon as the money comes in, you should be reinvesting that in the business to get to a certain point where then, if you want to leave the day job, then you can, you reach your target quicker, rather than taking the money early on and going really slowly. So
I think the one I was definitely delighted to give up was was managing my own properties, which I definitely used to do. But you also have to recognize in yourself there's some things you're not good at. I'm good at connecting people and getting excited about deals and finding deals. I do not get excited about organizing a gas safety certificate for a property, or the PAT testing, or tenant referencing. I'm fully aware that those things are absolutely essential. I also know I'm terrible at them. So
yeah, and you don't need to do them. You can spend your time working on the things that you enjoy and actually that grow the business.
Yeah, well, that's an interesting one, isn't it? Like concentrating on the money making activities as opposed to the kind of things that you could ship out and for not a huge amount of money get done by someone else who's good at it. So yeah, I don't think anybody can do it all on their own, especially because property is really lonely. If you were doing it on your own, you'd have to have huge reserves of resilience to not give up when things got tough. If you didn't, if we didn't know each other and loads of other people that we could say, I'm having a real pain with this deal, and someone to either be in the deal with you or to be there to listen and provide some advice or just an ear, I think we'd all give up pretty quick.
Yeah, that's interesting because you say, we're really lucky that we've got our network, but everyone's got to start somewhere. And I would say,
I said lucky, didn't I? And actually,
you did.
It's not lucky at all.
It's not luck at all.
Completely by design. So luck is not a factor. I definitely didn't go to school with 100 property investors who I just happened to know. So yeah,
that would be lucky.
So maybe I should have said we're fortunate that we're in the position, or we've created the position that we're able to do that. So.
We've done our fair share of networking meetings. I used to do 7 or 8 a month, going around and and just connecting people and being consistent as well. So it's not just about doing random things. It's about being consistent, getting to know people in your area, so that when there is a problem, you can connect with someone, and whether it's a WhatsApp group or Facebook group or through the magazine community or whatever it is, like connecting people and saying, does anyone have the builder or the plumber or whatever it is, or there's this particular situation, anyone got any tips or advice?
We're so connected now, aren't we, that if you're reading the magazine or part of our Facebook group or other property groups, if you can't find someone to help you out, then that's probably on you. It doesn't take that much work to get connected.
Yeah, it's certainly something that's an easy fix, isn't it?
Yeah, I would say so.
It is, yeah. Great. Okay. Well, they are the top 5 myths that we kind of came up with. There are plenty more, that's for sure. Any more that come to mind, Ant, or do you think that's enough for today? We could be here all day, to be honest.
Here's one that our editorial team raised quite a lot, and that's that property investors and landlords are greedy and they're super rich and they don't care about their tenants and they're just in this to make money. Well, the last bit is true. We are in this to make money. Let's not be embarrassed about that. You wouldn't go through all of the effort for this unless you intended to make money. But that doesn't mean that the other things are true at all. Many people, I wouldn't say they care deeply about their tenants, but they absolutely definitely want to provide a safe, warm place to live and see those people as their customers. And they're trying to create the very best products that they can for them. It takes a lot of work to do what we do. None of it comes dead easily. So I think we live in a country where it's really easy to paint a certain picture of the evil landlord. And I don't think it's fair at all, because having met many thousands of investors over the last 15 years, I would say pretty much without exception that they're ordinary people. Some are great, some are less great. They're just ordinary people, some of whom have achieved extraordinary things. So I think that myth about the picture that's painted about landlords is not a particularly true or fair one to us.
Yeah, you get people with different varying levels of morals in any industry, builders, solicitors, whatever. There's lots of people who will take advantage, and there's others that won't. Now, the whole point of what our ethos at the YPM magazine is that we are working with people who've got similar values, who are really looking to achieve excellence in what they do. So whether that is in providing the best quality or of the product, the property itself, or whether it's the best level of service, or they're looking to scale their business and work with other people and give back or educate other people, or whatever it is. I think that is something that is really important to us, and people who we find aren't ethical, they have nothing more to do with the magazine.
Yeah, I would definitely agree. So those are our top 6 myths in the end. So thanks for watching this. I hope it's been useful. You can navigate to yourpropertynetwork.co.uk to find out a little bit more about the magazine, our podcast, any of our specific training programs that we run as well. And we look forward to seeing you on another one of these videos.
Yeah, just click the link to find out more. See you next time.